The Awakening. The observation deck of Orbital Station Harmony provided Commander Kira Ellis a perfect view of Earth's gleaming cities and the massive orbital shipyards that surrounded the planet. Impressive construction facilities building warships that would never see combat, crewed by soldiers who would never face an enemy. 53 years after the Treaty of New Geneva, humanity had been effectively neutered. Kira ran her fingers along the scar that traced from her left temple to her jawline, a souvenir from the last war humans had been permitted to fight in. At 49, she was among the dwindling number who remembered combat firsthand. The younger officers called her the relic behind her back. Commander, priority transmission from Galactic Council headquarters, her neural interface announced, interrupting her thoughts. The holographic display materialized before her, revealing the stern face of High Counselor Threll, a cephalon with iridescent scales and compound eyes that seemed to study her from multiple angles simultaneously. Commander Ellis, the alien began, mandibles clicking with poorly concealed anxiety. I trust this communication finds you well. Cut the pleasantries, Counselor, Kira replied. The Earth Defense Force doesn't receive priority calls from the Council unless something's gone terribly wrong. Threll's scales rippled with discomfort. The Vorkath Collective has breached the Centauri barrier. 3 systems have already fallen. Kira maintained her composure, but her pulse quickened. The Vorkath were a hive mind species from the Outer Rim, brutal, efficient, and relentlessly expansionist. For decades, they had been contained beyond the barrier, building their forces and technology. The Council sends its concern, she said formally, the rehearsed response expected from humanity's military liaison. Commander, Threll's eyes darkened. We've lost 17 defense fleets. The Vorkath have developed countermeasures against our drone networks and AI defenses. The Council. He hesitated, mandibles trembling. The Council has voted to temporarily suspend certain provisions of the Treaty of New Geneva. Kira's expression remained neutral, but her heart hammered in her chest. Which provisions, specifically? All restrictions on human military deployment, Threll said, the words clearly causing him physical discomfort. The Council requests immediate human intervention against the Vorkath advance. 3 days later, Kira stood in the command center of the EDF Vengeance, a dreadnought that had been classified as a training vessel for decades. Around her bustled 500 human soldiers, none of whom had ever expected to see real combat in their lifetimes. Status report, she demanded, reviewing the tactical display showing the Vorkath advance toward Helios Prime, a critical agricultural world that supplied food to 17 species. All combat teams prepped and ready, replied Major Dant Chen, her executive officer. At 35, he'd spent his entire career in simulations. Though I'm not sure ready is the right word when none of us have fired a shot in anger. Kira nodded. You know why they banned us from fighting, Major. Chen's expression was grim. The Arcturus campaign. 3 species extinct, 2 planets rendered uninhabitable. That's the official story, Kira said quietly. The truth is they feared us because we don't fight like they do. Galactic warfare had become clinical, algorithmic, predictable. Conflicts with minimal casualties, resolved through superior positioning and technology. She gestured to the tactical display. That system worked until it didn't. And now they need monsters, Chen said. Now they need us, Kira corrected. But make no mistake, this is temporary. Once the Vorkath are dealt with, the cage door will close again. The briefing room fell silent as Kira activated the main display, showing Helios Prime, now partially occupied by Vorkath forces. Their biomechanical ships had latched onto the planet's surface like parasites, draining resources and processing captured civilians. Our mission is clear, she announced to the assembled officers. Liberate Helios Prime, stop the Vorkath advance, remind the galaxy why they feared us, and why they need us. The dropships punched through Helios Prime's atmosphere like meteors, trailing fire as they descended toward New Harvest, the planet's capital city. From orbit, the destruction was already visible. Vast sections of the once beautiful agricultural center lay in ruins, with Vorketh bioships anchored to the ground like massive ticks. Inside her dropship, Kira checked her combat armor one final time. Unlike the sleek, energy-shielded suits used by most galactic species, human combat systems were bulky, heavily plated, and designed with one purpose: to keep fighting long after the wearer should be dead. 30 seconds to impact, the ship's AI announced. "Remember the briefing," Kira said over the comm to her team. "No mercy, no hesitation. The Vorkath don't surrender, and neither do we." The dropship crashed through a partially collapsed building, its retro thrusters firing at the last moment to prevent a fatal impact. The doors blew outward, and Kira emerged into hell. New Harvest was burning. The elegant biodomes that had once defined the skyline were shattered, and the streets were littered with the bodies of civilians, Terran, Cephalon, and a dozen other species. The air reeked of smoke and the distinctive copper smell of Vorkath bioweapons. "Status report," Kira barked as her squad formed around her. "All teams deployed, minimal drop casualties," Shen responded, his voice crackling over the comm. "Enemy concentrations heaviest in the government district and central processing facility." Kira nodded, her helmet's HUD highlighting movement 2 blocks away. The skittering, multi-limbed forms of Vorkath drones. "Alpha with me," she ordered. "Beta and Gamma, circle around to the flank. Delta, secure our exit route." Then she raised her pulse rifle and moved forward. The Vorkath hadn't yet detected them. They were busy herding a group of terrified Loren civilians toward one of their bioships. Kira knew what happened to those taken aboard. Their neural patterns harvested to improve Vorkath tactical algorithms, their bodies processed into organic material for new drones. "On my mark," she whispered as her team took position. 3, 2, 1, mark. The first volley of fire cut down half the Vorkath instantly. Unlike the precision energy weapons used by most species, human pulse rifles were designed to overwhelm and devastate, riddling targets with superheated projectiles that exploded on impact. The Vorkath responded with inhuman speed, their segmented bodies twisting as they returned fire with biological weapons that sprayed caustic acid. But they had grown accustomed to fighting enemies who relied on shields and energy barriers, not the brute force armor and overwhelming firepower of human combat teams. "Push forward," Kira shouted as her team advanced methodically, cutting down the retreating Vorkath. No survivors. The civilians watched in shock as the humans moved with practiced precision. There was no hesitation, no mercy, just the relentless application of lethal force. Within minutes, the street was clear of living Vorkath, their bodies leaking yellowish ichor onto the pavement. Kira approached the Loren civilians, who stared at her with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "Get to the evacuation point at the central plaza," she told them. "More human forces are securing it now." One of the Lorens, an elder with violet-tinged skin, stared at Kira's insignia. "You're humans." They actually called Inhumans. "Yes," Kira said simply. The elder's face showed understanding and dread. "Then it's worse than we thought." Kira didn't respond. Instead, she checked her tactical display, noting with satisfaction that all of her teams were reporting success across their sectors. "Commander," Chen's voice came over the comm. "We've secured the local government building. You need to see this." The government building's command center was a scene of carnage. Helios officials lay dead at their stations, some dissolved by Vorkath acid, others bearing the precision cuts of close-quarter combat. But it was the central holographic display that drew Kira's attention. It showed not just Helios Prime, but the entire sector. The Vorkath advance was far greater than the Council had admitted. 23 systems had already fallen, not 3. The Vorkath were not just attacking, they were systematically exterminating. "They lied to us," Chen said quietly. "The situation is much worse than reported." Kira studied the tactical display, anger building inside her. They were too proud to admit how badly they were losing, too afraid to fully acknowledge they needed us. She opened a channel to the Vengeance in orbit. "Captain Torres, are you seeing this data?" "Affirmative, Commander," came the reply. "I've already forwarded it to Earth Command. They're not happy." Kira could imagine. For decades, humans had been relegated to the sidelines, treated as too dangerous to be trusted with real military power. Now they were being called in to clean up a disaster that had already spiraled far beyond what they'd been told. "New orders from Earth Command," Torres continued. "We are authorized to deploy all combat assets. Full tactical freedom granted." Kira's lips curved into a grim smile. Full tactical freedom was a phrase humans understood well. It meant the gloves were coming off. "Acknowledge," she replied. "Prepare for combat drop of all remaining forces. And Captain, dust off the special weapons package." There was a pause. The Council expressly forbade those weapons in the authorization. Reckoning. Night fell over Helios Prime, but darkness was broken by the fires of war. From his observation post on the shattered remains of a biodome, Threll's mandibles clicked in agitation. That information was classified. "Not anymore. You lied to us about the scope of this invasion. Then you expected us to fight with one hand tied behind our backs. That's not how humanity works." "Commander, I must insist." "No, Counselor, I must insist. You called us in because your civilized methods failed. Now you're getting what you asked for. Ellis out." She cut the transmission and turned back to the tactical display. The Vorkath were consolidating around their main bioship, a massive organic structure that towered over New Harvest's central district. It was their command center, processing facility, and hive node all in one. "All teams, report status," she ordered. "Alpha team in position. Beta team ready. Gamma team standing by. Delta team secure." Kira took a deep breath. "Deploy disruptors on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." Across New Harvest, the 5 neural disruptors activated simultaneously. There was no explosion, no visible effect at all, just a subtle distortion in the air like a heat mirage. But the effect on the Vorkath was immediate and catastrophic. Throughout the city, Vorkath drones suddenly turned on each other, their coordinated attacks dissolving into chaos. The hive mind that had directed them fractured, sections of the collective becoming isolated and hostile to one another. "Forward assault teams, move in," Kira ordered. "Hit them while they're disorganized." Human combat teams surged toward the main bioship, cutting down confused Vorkath forces with methodical precision. Unlike the Council species who relied on remote drones and AI targeting, humans led from the front, adapting instantly to changing battlefield conditions. From his position, Chen watched human soldiers employ tactics that would horrify their allies, using wounded Vorkath as bait, deploying area denial weapons that made no distinction between combatants and terrain, and advancing relentlessly despite taking casualties that would have caused other species to retreat. This was why humans had been banned from warfare, not just for the weapons they used, but for their willingness to pay any price for victory. "Commander," Chen called over the comm, "Primary assault team has breached the bioship's outer membrane, encountering heavy resistance from the central node guardians." "Understood," Kira replied. "I'm joining the assault team. Coordinate orbital support to target any Vorkath attempting to flee the system." Chen hesitated. "The Council fleet has arrived in system. They're demanding we stand down." Kira's laugh was bitter. "Tell them they're welcome to take over, as soon as we've finished the job they couldn't handle." Inside the Vorkath bioship, Kira led her assault team through corridors of pulsing organic matter. The ship was alive, in a sense. A massive organism built to house thousands of Vorkath drones and process captured beings into resources. "Central node ahead," her second-in-command reported. Heavy resistance. The chamber before them contained what appeared to be a massive brain, surrounded by specialized Vorkath guardians, larger, more heavily armored than the standard drones. These weren't affected by the neural disruptors, likely specially engineered to operate independently if the hive mind was compromised. Breaching charges, Kira ordered. Let's not be subtle. The explosion ripped through the organic chamber, and human forces poured through the gap, unleashing a barrage of fire that cut down the first wave of Guardians. The battle was ferocious. Close-quarters combat against enemies twice human size, with reflexes faster than any organic species had a right to possess. But where the Vorketh were fast, humans were tenacious. Where they were strong, humans were cunning. 3 soldiers fell to Vorketh claws, but the line held, pushing forward meter by bloody meter. Kira personally led the final push to the central node, emptying her rifle into the massive brain-like structure until it pulsed and quivered and finally went still. Throughout New Harvest, the remaining Vorketh forces collapsed as their connection to the hive was severed. 6 hours after the initial drop, Helios Prime was secured. The cost had been high. 47 human casualties, thousands of civilians dead or missing, but compared to the total losses the Council forces had suffered in previous engagements, it was a miracle of efficiency. Kira stood on the command deck of the Vengeance, watching the Council relief fleet arrive in system. Their ships maintained a noticeable distance from the human vessels. "They're scared of us," Chen observed, standing at her side. "Good," Kira replied. "Fear keeps the peace." The holographic display activated, showing High Counselor Threll and 5 other Council representatives. Their body language conveyed a mixture of gratitude and horror. "Commander Ellis," Threll began formally, "the Council extends its deepest appreciation for your intervention on Helios Prime. The Vorketh threat has been neutralized in this sector." "For now," Kira corrected. "They'll regroup and adapt. Hive minds always do." "Yes, well." Threll's mandibles twitched uncomfortably. "The Council has voted to continue the suspension of the treaty restrictions, while the Vorketh threat persists. We request human forces engage the remaining Vorketh strongholds in sectors Gamma 9 through Epsilon 3. Kira smiled thinly. "So you're still losing, and you still need monsters." The alien representatives shifted uneasily. One of them, a Tyrellian with crystalline features, spoke up. "We've analyzed your combat data from Helios Prime. Your methods were effective, if concerning." "War isn't pretty," Kira replied. "You've forgotten that during your decades of algorithmic conflicts and drone warfare, real war is bloody and brutal and doesn't follow rules. The treaty was meant to protect civilization from such methods," another counselor protested. "The treaty nearly got civilization wiped out," Kira countered. "When you face an enemy like the Vorketh, there's no room for half measures." She leaned forward, her scarred face filling the projection field. "We'll continue to fight your war, counselors. We'll save your worlds and your people. But understand this, humanity won't go quietly back into its cage when this is over." The counselors exchanged glances, realizing too late the consequence of their desperation. In calling upon humanity to save them, they had reminded the galaxy of what humans were capable of. The cage door had been opened, and it would never fully close again. As the Vengeance prepared to jump to the next battlefront, Kira stood at the viewport, watching the stars. 53 years of peace had not changed human nature. When threatened, when challenged, humanity still fought with everything it had. The galaxy had forgotten why they feared humans. Now they remembered.